Jennifer froze in fear at the unfamiliar voice and the frightening sound of the shotgun being racked. Her initial thought was, it's the sinners of society, as she had flashbacks to narrowly surviving the initial barbaric and ruthless encounter. She, along with the rest of the group, had no idea the homicidal, bloodthirsty monsters had taken up residence at the senior home, some 5+ miles away from their house. Blake was concealed on the other side of the Cadillac and had yet to be identified, his heart now beating rapidly, fearing it was the same diabolical bandits as his wife. The Rover placed the barrel of the Remington 870 directly onto Jennifer's lower skull as he grabbed her .22 caliber rifle that was left leaning up against the car, while she had desperately pulled at the fuses to disengage the boisterous car alarm. "Move an inch, and I'll blow your brains out, splattering them all over the interior of that car," he violently said. "Where's your companion?" I'm by myself," she hesitantly answered. "Don't bullshit me, Toots. I'm not some empty-headed imbecile," he angrily retorted. "I see 2 snowmobiles, 2 sets of footprints, and more supplies stuffed in these bags than one person can carry. This is now the Wild West, and I can do what I want. There's no police, no law enforcement, and I'm in charge here. So I'll once again ask where your partner is, and before you answer, think real hard about it. Because if you lie to me, again, you're going to die today," he threatened. Blake knew he had to act, either giving himself up or actively fighting back. Jennifer's loyalty was too strong. She'd never sell her husband out. If he did decide to go on the offensive, he would be putting her life in certain jeopardy. Being responsible for her death was something he just could not live with after witnessing the shocking murder of his daughter already. "Fine. We'll do this the hard way then." And the madman grabbed Jennifer by the ponytail, forcefully pulling her to her feet. Before Blake could surrender, the thundering sound of the shotgun exploded and echoed throughout the neighboring houses. "Jennifer!" Blake yelled in horror as he jumped up, revealing himself from the cover of the car. "There you are, you spineless coward. You were going to let her die, weren't you? Drop that rifle, put your hands in the air, and walk slowly this way," the man commanded. "That was a warning shot. The next one I won't be so generous with," as he now forced Jennifer back to her knees and positioned the barrel back against her temple. The crazed stranger wore a bandana around his face, obscuring his identity like an outlaw would. The booming sound of the gunshot jolted me and sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't uncommon for us to occasionally hear the sound of gunfire to our south, where the center of town was, but this was different. This was close, too close, and sounded like it came from the east. I waited for Blake or Jennifer to say something over the walkie. 10 seconds went by. 20 seconds. 30 seconds, and nothing but silence. I was hesitant about radioing them in case they were pinned down and hiding. The last thing I wanted was to disclose their location over our lines of communication. Jimmy came roaring out from the backyard. "I don't like this," he said. "Me either," I replied. We both desperately stared at the walkie, still waiting for one of the voices to suddenly come through. "That was the sound of a shotgun shell shooting off," I muttered. And we both knew neither Blake or Jennifer was armed with one. He left with his battle rifle and sidearm. Jennifer was carrying my .22 that had belonged to Jody. I pulled out the map Blake had drawn before the pair had left. I quickly scanned for location 1 and said, "There it is. I'm going after them." We heard the car alarm and the gunshot. There's no telling who else did. They're in trouble. "Do you think it's SOS?" Jim questioned. "I don't know, but there's only one way to find out," I said. "We're now in DEFCON 1, Jim. I want you to stay here in case they show back up. Stay alert, stay vigilant, and hold down the homestead until I return." I set off on foot due east, running as fast as I could through the treacherous snowpack. The glaring sunshine reflecting off the snow was practically blinding as I peered down the barren road. It was a struggle as I trudged and plodded my way to the Cooper's house. Why only one gunshot, I wondered to myself. Back at the scene, the unknown assailant had forced Jennifer to zip tie her husband's hands together behind his back before he did the same to her. The couple were now restrained on their knees, forced to face one another. I'm going to ask you both some questions, and you're going to supply me with the answers I'm demanding. Every time I think you're lying to me, or you make me repeat myself, there's going to be consequences, the thug shouted. Let's get this party started now, shall we? There seems to be a lot of supplies in these bags. Where are you taking them? Where are you two holed up at? He vigorously asked. Wouldn't you like to know? Jennifer shouted. You see now? That wasn't very smart, he said with a demonic smile. The shotgun that had been pointed at both of the prisoners was now held by both hands, one on the barrel and the other on the stock. He destructively rammed the buttstock into the bridge of Blake's nose. His skin exploded. Blood rushed down, saturating his face, and he fell over from the force of the strike. Jennifer muttered, "You son of a bitch," under her breath. He turned to face her and said, "You say something, sweetheart?" The pure white snow began to once again turn scarlet red, soiled by the blood pouring off Blake's face. He struggled back to his knees and spit out a significant amount of blood that had leaked into his mouth. I warned the two of you, don't test me. I'm hungry, I'm cold, and I'm tired. You're going to kill us anyway, so just do it already and get it over with, you piece of trash, Blake roared. You must be slow, mister. Didn't learn the first time, did you? The thug asked. He then pointed the 20-inch barrel squarely in Blake's direction and asked, "Any last words, mister?" Blake quivered in shock, and before he could muster any words, the animal pulled the trigger. Blake felt the heat and velocity of the slug speed by his left ear. Not sure if the miss was intentional or not, he closed his eyes, fearing a second round was to follow. The thug let out a devilish laugh, clearly enjoying his scare tactics. Alarmed at the unnerving sound of a second gunshot exploding, I picked up my pace, pushing myself even harder through the difficult conditions. I was within 100 yards of the farmhouse and bracing myself to have to engage in a firefight. Before the depraved degenerate finished his sinister laugh, and with the smell of gunpowder still filling the air, Jennifer launched herself up from her knees, landing on her feet, and abruptly charged at the thug, driving her right foot into the side of the thug's knee, causing him to buckle and collapse onto the snow. Blake followed her and labored to his feet and immediately kicked the 12-gauge from the marauder's grip, stomping on his hands. The husband and wife tag team continued propelling steel-toed boots to the body and face of the attacker. They were relentless and determined to keep him off his feet. After all, Blake and Jennifer's hands were both still constrained by zip ties behind their backs. If he was able to stand and regain control of the shotgun, their story of survival during the apocalypse was sure to end today. From a distance, I finally had eyes on the members of my group. They were both kicking and stomping aggressively with their hands restrained behind them. What had they gotten into, I pondered. Blake! Jennifer! I shouted as I approached the chaotic scene. The white Cadillac CTS had concealed the body they were viciously assaulting. Winded and sweating from the 3/4-mile dash, I joined in on the fracas. Running forward with full momentum, I delivered a monstrous boot to his mouth that surely dislodged some teeth. I hopped on his back and reached for the heavy-duty zip ties I kept in my back left pocket, quickly securing his hands like he had done to Blake and Jennifer. We're glad to see you, the pair said. Not as glad as I am to see you both still alive. Blake's nose was busted open pretty bad, and the blood continued to spill down his face. You okay, brother? I asked. I've been through worse, he answered, as he flashed his disfigured hand, alluding to his horrific confrontation with the sinners of society. I pulled out my knife from my front right pants pocket and very carefully freed the two of them from the restraints. Jennifer swiftly ran over to her husband, taking the sleeve of her jacket and wiping away the stream of crimson that covered his face. The two embraced as their attacker moaned and groaned on the ground. "Who is this guy? Is he SOS?" I sternly asked. "Don't know. He ambushed us as we fumbled with the car alarm," Blake said. "He manhandled Jennifer at gunpoint, fired off one round threatening to kill her, forced me to disarm, shackled us, broke my nose, and before he started to interrogate us, discharged another round that buzzed my still ringing left ear. If it wasn't for Jennifer's bravery and quick thinking, I fear he would have killed the both of us," Blake bitterly said. "Is that so?" I said to the now pummeled pillager. I forcefully rolled him over onto his back, and he squealed in pain from what I suspected were broken ribs after the thrashing he had received. I pulled down the bandana that concealed his face. His mouth was bleeding, and several teeth were dislodged from the kick I delivered. He was just a kid, his baby face bare of facial hair, minus a few patchy stubs. He definitely wasn't of drinking age, and I doubted he could even legally purchase a tobacco. "How old are you, kid?" I asked. "Screw you and those two douchebags too," he answered. "I'm not telling you guys jack shit," as he struggled to catch his breath. "Would you look at this?" I turned towards Blake and Jennifer and said, "We got a real tough guy here. You know what happens to tough guys, kids?" "What?" he shouted. "I start butchering their fingers off one by one until they start talking." "You wouldn't dare," he nervously responded. "Oh, you don't think so, huh? Blake, show him your hand," I said. Blake held up his left hand, showing the mutilated stubs that he had suffered at the hands of SOS, but the kid didn't need to know that. "If I were you, I'd start talking before he starts dismembering," Blake announced with a stone-cold face. "Jesus, mister, you did that to your friend?" "You really are a deranged individual," the kid uttered. "I am. And if I did that to my friend, just imagine what I'm going to do to a punk-ass hooligan who tried to attack them," I scornfully voiced. "Get him up and lean him over the hood of the car," I ordered to my doomsday cohorts. Blake and Jennifer each grabbed one of his arms, pulling him up, and strong-armed him towards the car. Blake placed his right hand on the back of the kid's neck and propelled it straight into the hood of the car. The thug heard his nose shatter and break as it bounced off the vehicle. Excruciating pain exploded through his head. He couldn't stop the cry of pain from exploding through his throat, which was quickly clogging with blood. The metallic taste of the fluid filled his mouth. "Oops," Blake half-heartedly voiced. It was obvious payback for the kid striking Blake on the bridge of his nose minutes earlier. "Hey, kid, are you right-handed or left-handed?" I asked. "Why?" he struggled to say. "Because I want to start removing fingers from your dominant hand first and make the rest of your miserable existence as difficult as possible for you." I'll talk, as he pleaded and begged for mercy. "Good decision. Now turn around and look at me face to face," I commanded. The bruising and swelling was quickly settling in on his badly bloodied nose. "I'll ask again. How old are you?" 19, he replied. "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" "What do you think I'm doing? I'm scavenging for supplies just like they were." "You belong to a group?" I anxiously asked. "A group?" he questioned. "If you mean me and a few friends, then yeah, I guess I do." "Where are you sheltering at?" "Why would I tell you? So you can go kill them?" he responded. Continuing to probe, I asked if he was with the sinners of society. "The sinners of what?" he wondered. "Never heard of them, and I have no clue what you're talking about." I unholstered my Glock 19 and shoved the barrel into his bloody mouth. "You wouldn't lie to me, would you, kid?" He trembled in terror, unable to voice the words he was trying to mouth, due to the combination of blood and the Glock cylinder that filled his muzzle. Would you look at that?" Blake called out. "He's pissing his pants." Sure enough, the discharge of urine began saturating and soiling the jeans he was wearing. Disgusted by the cowardly act of losing control of his bladder, I removed my sidearm that was now covered in blood from his mouth. He was hysterical, frantic, probably embarrassed, and dropped to his wet knees and began begging for leniency. "I swear, I have no idea who you're talking about. We've been holed up moving house to house looking for resources." "Sure, I've done things I'm not proud of, but who hasn't? This is a kill-or-be-killed world. Only the strong will survive," the kid cried out. Are you going to kill me?" he stuttered. "No, you're going to take me to your group. And we're going now," I said with a sadistic smile as I pulled him to his feet.